maybe some ideas as well, to help you start to explore this question of getting things legally going. So some of you may have picked up that there was a webinar a couple of weeks ago where we had quite a knowledgeable solicitor actually going through, giving quite a detailed blow-by-blow account of all the different legal structures that you can adopt, what they mean in practice, and some of the pros and cons of each. What I'm not doing today is I'm not going to give a repeat of all of that. If you really want all that technical knowledge, then by all means go back to his webinar, access those notes, that's fine. What I want to do today is help you start to make sense of how you approach the question of setting up the legal structure and what it might mean in terms of money, accountability, regulation, flexibilities, and so on. So hopefully that's all okay. So my name is Adrian Ashton, as Julie mentioned. If you want to find out a bit more about me and the other sorts of adventures that I get up to, there's an address with a website. So feel free to have a look at that. There's some video clips, pictures, and so on. Okay, so this is what we're going to try and cover off before 1 o'clock this afternoon, giving you an appreciation as to why it's good to at least think a bit about legal forms, a framework to start to approach it through. So how do we start to think about, how do we start to filter this knowledge, thinking about the roles of the regulators. And I think this is really important because very rarely in my experience when there's any learning or teaching, training that goes on around legal structures, no one ever talks about the regulators. But it's the regulators who keep an eye on you, depending on your legal form. The regulators who can do different things to you if you start to step out of line. So I think it's important to be aware of them. A brief overview of the options. I'm not going to go through all 15. You can stop panicking now. I'm just going to go through the main sort of 3 or 4 that are the most commonly used amongst social entrepreneurs, and then also a little bit about where you can go next. So what happens after 1 o'clock and you've logged off and you've gone back, made yourself your cups of tea, stretched your legs. What can you do next? How can you start to take this further in exploring it and in learning about it? Hopefully that all sounds okay and logical. The good news is I've got a clock right in front of me, and I've got a window to the side of me, and out of my window I can see it's blue sky and sunny. So I, with all due respect to you guys and how great you all are, I don't want to be here longer than I've said I'm going to be because it's a lovely day out there. So I want to make sure we all get out and enjoy that a bit later. Just a bit about myself, really just to reassure you that what I say isn't just made up and off the top of my head. Some words though on the screen. I've been involved in various programs and issues around social enterprise and legal forms over the years. Some bits in there you can kind of see. But just because I say I think I know what I'm talking about, and I will cite research and give you stories and case studies and examples, doesn't mean you should take everything I say as the gospel truth. That doesn't just apply to me, that applies to everyone. Anyone you go to for advice, always wait, reflect on what they say and they suggest. Because me and them, we are not the people who are going to be living with you and your enterprise day in, day out after all this goes. Okay? You're the person who's going to live with it. You're the person who's going to have to explain it to other people. So you need to be confident and comfortable about the decisions and the choices you've made and why. So never be afraid to challenge. Always be afraid to ask. Always ask for a second opinion if you're not sure. Okay, so that word of warning in place. Let's kind of get in to some of the content of this perhaps. So this is why legal structures are important and why you shouldn't, or you should try and stay awake. So if you haven't already had a copy this morning, now's a good time to put the kettle on and start to slip in and out, because this is important. It's important because your legal structure informs how the world sees you. Some people think KICs, community interest companies, are brilliant, and if you're not a KIC, then they don't think you're not a real social enterprise. Some people think you have to be a charity. Okay, so yeah, the form you adopt affects the way that other people see you. So that's really important. The different legal options also have different implications in the way you can raise money. So charities, for example, very good way to, or very appropriate way to start to seek gifts, applying for grants, donations, and so on. Not necessarily that useful if you're trying to raise sort of big chunks of money as investment capital. So if you're looking for a kind of like a social enterprise version of the Dragon's Den, that won't be quite so keen because you can't offer them the mechanism, the structures that those investors are used to dealing with as we go through. How much freedom you want to have in the future. Okay, so some legal structures you pretty much lock in from day one what you do and how you do it. Charities, for example, you have to be very specific when you apply for charitable status, what sort of things you're going to be doing. Otherwise, and if you want to change that in the future, it could be problematic. Other legal forms, there's much more flexibility. You can just pretty much buy and sell and trade as you want to. It's also about protecting people's risk. You know, your founding members, your staff, your volunteers, your boards, they're all giving generously of their time. So it's important to be able to think about what you can do to help recognize that, to help protect their interest. Protecting your original vision, because 20 years from now, when the business is still going strong, there'll be another group of people who are at the helm, taking it forward. You want to make sure they're kind of protected on that. So it's all about this idea of trying to future-proof yourself, thinking about not what's important today, but what might change in the future. So I have a little sort of a word that I use when I'm talking about legal structures normally, and that's cramp. Generally, anything you get bored with, you start to cramp up if you're sitting in your chair. But I've tried to turn it around. So here's the kind of the framework to approach legal structures with, and thinking about your form and structure. How do they help you gain credibility? How do they help you structure your relationships with all the different people you want to be engaging with appropriately? How do they give you appropriate accountability mechanisms? Who holds you in check? What power do they have over you? Who do you answer to protect that mission, to keep it honest, to keep it on the straight and narrow? Where does the money come from? Where does the money go to? How does that change over time? And the big biggie, power. Who gets it? Who wields it? Who can challenge them over it? How do they give it back? How do they keep their actual control? So that's the kind of the 5 facets to be thinking about when you start to look at this question of legal forms and structures. Okay, that's all the background stuff done. Hopefully most people are still with me and vaguely still awake. A little bit now about the regulators, and then we'll look at start to look at some of the implications of the main types of legal forms and how you start to approach them. So there are 4 regulators we're going to look at today. The first one is the Companies House and the FSA. The FSA is the Financial Services Authority. The Companies House regulates all companies, whether that's company limited by guarantee, share or PLC. And the FSA, the Financial Services Authority, currently regulates societies. So industrial and provident societies, community benefit societies, cooperative societies. Generally speaking, they're quite nice as regulators because they let you get on with it. Okay, the phrase prudential is a legal term. What it means is you run the business as you think it should be run. They can't mess with the management, with the structures and all the rest. What they're concerned about is your paperwork, really. Are you keeping all the paperwork up to date? Are you filing it on time? And if you are, great, they'll let you get on with it. Their powers are quite important to be aware of, so what if you don't do that and they find out? They can investigate you, they can come over, poke around, and if they think it's appropriate, and this doesn't happen a lot, okay, this is very rare, but they can take legal action against the directors personally. Okay? But if you're keeping all your paperwork up to date, if you're putting your returns in on time, if you're keeping within the law, it's pretty much, you let you get on with it. The other side, the other 2 regulators, the KIC regulator, Community Interest Company regulator, and the Charity Commission. This is quite important actually because a lot of social entrepreneurs and social enterprises I come across are quite wedded and quite excited about the idea of becoming a KIC. There's a lot of advice. If you want to be a social enterprise, be a KIC. But you don't get a lot of sort of background as to what that might mean, also being a charity. Charities are nice, as we'll come on to, because of the brand, because of the ability to receive gifts and grants and donations. The KIC might be nice in some circumstances because of that branding that it can give you. We'll come on to that. But the regulators, this is where it starts to step up a bit. Like Companies House and the others, they want to make sure you're keeping your paperwork up to date. They can also take action against individual directors or trustees in the case of a charity if they feel it's appropriate. The other ones to be aware of, and this is kind of where you have to be really mindful about how you're running the organisation, how the accountability is working, how transparent you are. They can get involved in how you run the organisation, how you run the enterprise. Okay, they can come in. Charity Commission, for example, has very clear guidance and rules about the ability to trade. Okay? We'll come on to that. The KIC regulator also has the power to enforce restrictions on your trading activities if they feel it's appropriate. The other thing as well, of course, that these two regulators have is if they feel it's appropriate, if you start to have people on the board who are getting a bit out of hand, these regulators have the power to come in and take them out. Not as an issue a contract on them, but they have the power to remove them legally from being a director and a trustee and appoint others of their choosing as the regulator to protect that mission, to protect that vision of the enterprise. The other thing to be aware of as well, which the KIC regulator is the only one with this power, technically they have the power to sue other people in the name of your enterprise and protecting that mission and protecting your assets. So some quite powerful safeguards there to be aware of. But it's useful to be aware of these things. If you don't want to be beholden to a government regulator who has these powers over you, then don't pick these structures. But think about other things. They can be useful because they start to generate that kind of framework. It asks you the questions. Do we really want to be answerable in these ways? Do we really want to have a body who can do these things to us? And it may be that you think that's fine. And I know of KICs and charities who use those regulators to their benefit. So when they're working with other people, when they're working in partnership, when they're kind of proving their credentials, they actually talk in great detail about the powers of the KIC regulator to reassure those potential partners and investors that they're sound, that they're safe, that they can be trusted. Okay, so that's the regulators in about 3.5 minutes. Now then, the actual sort of options just to kind of look at briefly. This is probably going to be the scariest slide you see on your screens today, if not all week, actually. Legal structures can be very messy, and that's because here in England, Wales and Northern Ireland, we have 15 options. And I specifically make the distinction about not including Scotland because in Scotland there is a 16th option. The odd one out is the CIO, the Charitable Incorporated Organisation. Now I'm not going to be covering the CIO today. That was covered in quite some detail in a previous webinar. So don't really kind of want to go over that ground. Also because most of the United Kingdom isn't eligible to apply for the CIO status at the moment. It's probably going to be next year at the very earliest. And even when it does become an option, it will be what's called a phased implementation. So it will only be available to existing charities to begin with, and then in a few years' time to new starts. So we'll maybe come back to that in a future webinar in a couple of years' time. So here's the main options. There's 6 flavors of company, guarantee, share, PLC. And then on top of that you can stick the KIC model as well, so that gives you 6. 2 forms of setting up a charity, unincorporated, or as an incorporated charity, so a charity and a company, partnerships, a trust, a sole trader, and this is where most social entrepreneurs start out, as a sole trader. Someone who has an idea and says, well, look, I'm just going to start buying and selling to test it, to get it going, and that's fine. It's very light touch regulation. It allows you to be very flexible and get things up and going. There's the unincorporated association, so there's a few of you get together. And there's this, I've mentioned this idea of the cooperative societies. So I'm not going to go through all of those. What I want to do is give you a bit of background to where these concepts of the legal structures have come from, not as a history lesson, but as a bit of context, look at some of the main options and how you can start to set them up and where you go next. Okay. Hopefully everyone's okay for timing. I've got a little panel I can see on my screen, and there's no flashing red light saying people need to go to the toilet, or can you stop because you've lost everyone, so I'll keep going for now. So talk a little bit about cooperatives first. I think this is quite important to kind of get some idea of the understanding as to why social enterprise structures exist as they do today. Social enterprise as a concept, in terms of as we call it social enterprise, has only really been around since the 1990s. Cooperatives have been around, well, since time immemorial, really. There's a reference to a cooperative in the 15th century running public services. There are references to cooperatives in Roman times, in Babylonian times. Cooperatives are businesses where people come together to support each other in times of hardship. So it's about people coming together and addressing something that's not quite fair in the marketplace. Which sounds a bit like what social enterprise does. Social enterprises say, I see if there's a problem in the world, I'm going to go out and I'm going to do something about it. Cooperatives have said, there's a problem in the world, it's better if we try and fix it together, collectively, collaboratively. So on that basis, they're seen as the kind of the daddy or the mummy of social enterprise today. One of the key defining characteristics is about democracy, so one member, one vote, everyone's in it together. And there are some interesting precedents that cooperatives set. Community interest companies were formed about 6-7 years ago because the social enterprise sector said we need a better legal form for social enterprises. Back in 1850, the cooperatives of the day said we need a better legal form for cooperative enterprises. And so the government set that up. So looking at some of the options now, I'm going to look at three really. One is companies, one is community interest companies, and one is charities. Just to give you a brief overview, a little bit of profile about them and how you can start to set them up and use them. So companies, there are lots of different types of company, the most common of which is a company limited by guarantee. So nobody really owns a company limited by guarantee. The members, the people who've set it up, they decide what it should be about, and those members decide who should be the board of management, who should be the directors who run it on their behalf. In effect, they become custodians. No one can own a company. There's no shares to buy and sell in it. We kind of stand as a guarantor. Companies limited by guarantee. What that means is, if it all goes horrendously pear-shaped, we agree to pay the debt up to the value of, say, £1 or £10, and no more. They're very flexible. There's a lot of leeway that you can have within what are called the articles or the rules of companies to put in what you want to protect and reflect your values, your aims, also to define those characteristics of social enterprise. Just as a quick recap, there are three defining characteristics that any social enterprise should be able to evidence within its rules. One is its purpose. It's set up to do something good in the world. The second is a restriction on the ability to give profits to individuals. So most of the money should go back into achieving its purpose. And the third is there's what's called an asset lock. Okay, so over time, as the businesses grow, it gains stuff. Okay, money in the bank, computers, equipment, Lamborghinis, private jets, and so on. 20 years from now, if the enterprise is wound up, those assets, that stuff, has been, because in recognizing it's been gained in the name of supporting the community, should therefore be given back to the community, not to private individuals. Okay, so those are the three characteristics. Company articles, you can put those in pretty easily, along with other things. And they're the most common of all the legal forms we see in terms of social enterprise today. There are three ways that you can set one up. You can go online. So there are various online incorporating agents, as they're called. They do all the paperwork for you, and you pay them anywhere between sort of £20 and £100 or thereabouts. Do a few emails, and that's it. It's all set up. You can go do it yourself. So you go to Company's House, download all the forms. You need an incorporation form, which is called IN01. Fill that out. There's some guidance notes on it. You also need to write up a set of articles. You can have asked around, borrow someone else's, tweak them a bit, and you submit them with a cheque for £40. Or you can use an agent. People like me or high street solicitors who'll sit down with you, have a chat, and actually work out what needs to be in your rules to reflect your vision and your values properly, and help you understand that. Once the company's set up, it's very easy to look after. Once a year you do a return to company's house. So you send in your accounts and what's called an annual return, and the annual return says, these are the directors, this is where we're based, we're still going, and away you go. It's very easy to make changes to your rules, because you just get the members together, you agree to change the rules, and the rules are changed. And it's also very cheap as well. So you don't need to do any kind of, unless you've kind of got millions of pounds worth of turnover, you don't need to have your accounts audited. And they're also quite attractive to grant-making bodies as well. So most grant-making bodies will be open to receiving applications for grants for particular projects or development ideas from a company limited by guarantee. European funds, lottery funds, maybe local trusts as well. That's company. The next one is the community interest company. So I've mentioned a few things about these already, but just to kind of clarify a little bit about them. A community interest company is a form of company. So you have to have an existing limited company to begin with, and then you can apply for the KIC status on top of that. So you kind of you've got two legal identities. The idea is that it gives you a clear brand in the marketplace, because as a KIC you must include the letters CIC or the phrase community interest company within your trading name. Okay, that's a requirement. The idea of that is when you go out to the marketplace, to your customers, suppliers, partner organizations, investors, and you say we're a KIC, community interest company, they'll immediately get it. They'll understand what you're about, and you'll have instant kudos and all the rest. The challenge with that at the moment is various pieces of research that have been undertaken by the KIC regulator and others over the years shows that that public awareness isn't quite there yet, generally speaking, in terms of public awareness. So maybe that branding isn't quite as great as it might be. It could come in time though. There are some KICs though who they found that that identity, that visible identity, is very useful in helping them pursue their mission. So for example, there's a media social enterprise over in Yorkshire I've spent a bit of time with a few months ago. They were very clear they wanted to be a KIC, not because of any other fact than the name, because what it allowed them to do is when they went into their marketplaces, when they spoke with their peers and they said we're a KIC, that forced all those other organisations to say we've never heard of a KIC, what's that then? And it gave them an excuse to talk about their social mission, their purpose, to spread the gospel of social entrepreneurship into that industry and marketplace, which they couldn't otherwise very easily do. So they're very clever in how they use that. As a KIC, there's also some additional legislation. So in terms of if you're a KIC limited by shares, there are certain rules about how much profit you can distribute through shares. And in terms of share dividend payment, there's caps on that. There's also the additional regulator. So as well as all the returns to Companies House, we also need to put a return to the KIC regulator. And that return, broadly speaking, asks what you've done this year to benefit the community and how the community has been involved in the way that you've managed the organisation. Now the application process within a KIC is pretty straightforward. It's all paper-based. As with the company, there's a form to fill out. You tick the boxes, you put the words in, you send it in. And if the words all sound right, and you tick the right boxes, congratulations, you become a KIC. There is a downside, just a couple of words of kind of warning perhaps, not to try and put you off, just to make sure you're aware. KICs cannot do any of their returns electronically. So of all the legal options and legal forms to trade with, charities, straightforward companies, you can do all your returns to the regulators online, the night before it's due, and that's fine, and then you won't get into trouble. As a KIC, you can't file online. You have to do paper-based returns still, so it takes a bit longer with the administration there. There's also not that much proven benefit in terms of financing for KICs. Grant-making bodies, loan investors as well, being a KIC doesn't seem to sway them that much because you have to be a company behind it, and what those investment bodies and grant-making bodies are interested in is what type of company you're and what do your rules say. So the KIC status in itself at the moment doesn't seem to be offering that much by way of added ability to access money. And it also, in terms of if you're thinking about rate relief, so if your enterprise is taking on commercial premises, it will only be able to apply for the discretionary amount of rate relief as well. So be aware of that in terms of some of your budgeting. Now, there are lots of KICs. There's about 6,000 KICs out there. Most of them are very happy to share their experiences, talk about their understanding, what they found to date. And they formed an online community called the KIC Association. So if you can kind of like you can log it, you can register on that for free, or you can just sort of scroll through all the discussions. So if you point your website at KIC, which is CICASSOC.ning, N-I-N-G, that will take you to the website. So CICASSOC.ning, and that will take you to the KIC Association, where you can kind of hang out with all the existing KICs and hear about some of their experiences and how they've used the KIC model to their benefit. And that leads us then to charities. Okay, the third kind of the big option in terms of social enterprise. Charities, it's useful to perhaps think about their background. Okay, charities are based in a very Victorian philanthropic mindset and culture. It's about doing good things to people rather than doing with them. Okay, and that's kind of worked through in terms of some of the legislation. So they have this, I've used this phrase, paternalistic culture. Legally, if you're a trustee of a charity, you should not be receiving any financial or material benefit from that charity. So in order to be purely altruistic, to make sure the charity is acting in the best interests of the community and its beneficiaries, those people who are governing it, its board of trustees, should not be unduly influenced by any potential for personal gain. So that can have implications for you as entrepreneurs in thinking about issues of control and management. Because if you're setting this enterprise up and it's growing very well, and it's a charity, and you're getting paid by it, then that's a conflict of interest. You're receiving a material benefit from the charity, and that needs to be carefully managed. And the way that it's managed, usually, is that you have a board of trustees above you who have power over you. So potentially, they can start to take the enterprise in a different direction to your original vision. So be mindful of that. But there's the charities. Everyone loves charities. Everybody gets it. People trust it. People are very open to them. Various profiles as well, particularly in sort of the UK amongst English charities. The bigger the charity, the more income it generates from trading activities. So you can trade as a charity. There's what's called primary purpose trading. So when you register the charity, as long as you kind of set out, say this is what we're setting out to achieve that's good in the world, and these are the ways we're going to do it, and if that's kind of closely aligned with your business model, or closely aligned enough, then there's no limit, no cap on the amount of trading you can do to achieve that. And there's plenty more guidance on the Charity Commission's website that kind of outlines that. So there's good ability to trade there. And the way you apply to become a charity is you go to the Charity Commission website. It's all online. There's no paper form option anymore. So you go to the website, pop in your email address to register, and you start the process. And it will take you through some screens which are about what's your name, who are you, where are you based, what things you're going to be doing, and so on. But you need to have some basic things in first place. Okay, so a KIC and the company, you can set the company up and then do all the administrative stuff afterwards. So you don't need a bank account, you don't need premises, you don't need to fully, worked out who the board of people are going to be. You can, just as you can set the company up and then backfill all that stuff. As a charity, and applying to a charity, you have to do all that first. So you have to have a bank account in place. You have to have, about £5,000 or £10,000 of identified secured income for the coming year in place as well. And you need to know who those other people are going to be as trustees. Again, there are people who can kind of help you go through that, people like myself, other incorporating agents, but also there's a lot of good guidance on the Charity Commission website as well. So those are the big three. I mentioned before, though, there were 15 options. Scotland, 16 if you count Scotland. We've had a previous webinar. We've had a solicitor taking you through an awful lot of detail in terms of all those different options. So why have I only talked about three? Well, I'm conscious of time, because we're already halfway through the time we've got together today. And also for most social entrepreneurs, most of those legal options will never get onto the radar. They'll never be an option. Okay? They're just not relevant. So what I've tried to do today was to give you a structure and a framework to think about how do we approach this. So that idea of the cramp, credibility, relationships, accountability, money and power. So once we've worked out those things about what's most important to us, we can then start to look at these sort of legal options a bit better and understand them. Giving you a quick overview of some of these legal options, some of the features and benefits, pros and cons, and how you start to set them up and look after them. But why did I pick those three? I hear you all asking, or screaming at your computer screens. Why didn't you tell us about the others? Well, I picked those three, companies limited by guarantee, community interest companies and charities, because they're the big three. They're kind of the holy trinity of legal structures in social enterprise land. And that's because Social Enterprise UK does a survey every couple of years in social enterprise, and those are the ones that they kind of come out with. Companies limited by guarantee, registered charities, KICs are quickly moving up the list, as well as you'll see. And then we've also got the NCVO. If you're not aware of them, NCVO is the National Council of Voluntary Organisations. They produce what they call an almanac every year, and I really like their almanac because it's got loads of great, exciting pictures like this in, called infographics. Information as pictures makes information beautiful. And it starts to show how big are the different types of organisations. So you can start to sort of work out, cooperatives, companies limited by guarantee, charities, and so on. Charities by far the biggest. So that's why I picked on those three. What I also wanted to do with you as well is give you a bit more signposting and background in terms of thinking about, well, this might have been useful, it's given you a good basic understanding. Where do I go next? How do I start to apply this? How do I start to understand some more of the details, the direct implications and such like? There's an awful lot of support out there that you can access. Unlimited Connect has reciprocal arrangements with law firms and volunteer mentors who can meet with you individually and chat through particular circumstances of what you do. And if that's the case, then get in touch with Unlimited and your kind of contacts there. There's an awful lot of stuff on the web as well. Okay, you can kind of really tie yourself up in knots if you're trying to educate yourself. So what I'm going to suggest are two starting points that at the moment I really rate personally for you to start to have a look at. There are lots of other places, and as you start to explore these, no doubt it will you'll find other things and you'll branch off and create these wonderful learning paths in building your own knowledge. So this first one is a website, it's a web tool called Get Legal. So you go to, as you see in the bar at the top, getlegal.org.uk. There's kind of some wordy bits in this, but the bit that it's got in it that's really nice is it's got a tool called Selector Structure. And what that is, it's a multiple choice quiz. And I've always been a big fan of multiple choice exams when I was at school and university, because they're very quick and easy to get through, but also because actually it helps focus you a lot more. So it really helps focus your thinking, helps you kind of work out what's relevant and what's not very quickly and easily. So you go on to Get Legal, you kind of register, so you give them your email address, and then it takes you through this set of about a dozen questions. And they're all scenario-based questions, so they're all the what if and how are you thinking about this issue question. So the first question will be, for example, how are you going to raise the money to start this enterprise, A, B, or C? What happens if the enterprise is wound up 20 years from now because it's fixed that problem, A, B, or C? Is it going to employ people, A, B, or C? How is it going? So all these sorts of, direct questions that you're going to be facing as the enterprise steps up, as it grows, potentially even as it winds up. Okay, there's no shame in an enterprise being wound up after however many years if it's fulfilled its purpose, if it finds there's a better way of fixing that problem. So be mindful of that. That's the Get Legal side. That's quite nice. And that, again, you go to those questions and then it spits out, here are the options in terms of the legal structures that will best allow you to manage and finance and run the enterprise in that way that you want to run it. Rather than kind of looking at the other way first and saying, if you want to be a company, we have to do this and not that. Let's think about what you want to do first and how you want to do it, and then find the form that fits. So that's a really good tool. The other one is a PDF. You can download it for free, again as well, called Simply Legal. That's what it looks like when you find it on the website. It's produced by Co-operatives UK, so most people are getting pretty good these days, I think, with Google searches. So Google Simply Legal, something like that. Now when you download it as a PDF, you kind of look at in your PDF reader and you go, how many pages is this? Oh my goodness. And you might be a bit scared, okay? the word count box is the scariest, though the page count is the scariest part of this document, because actually what it does is it goes through all those different legal forms in really good plain English, giving you pros and cons, giving you a couple of case studies, giving you a couple of examples and illustrations along the way as well. So it's a really good way. Once you start to think, okay, I think I've narrowed it down to a couple of options and I want to read up on them a bit more, this is a really good resource to start to inform yourself to do that. So I highly commend that. That's Simply Legal as well. Now, this is the golden slide for today. Okay, this is one, if you remember nothing else from the last 40 minutes, if you remember nothing else in terms of what you've seen on your screens, if you never come back to Unlimited or never ask anyone else about legal structures again, this is the most important thing I can ever say to anyone about legal structures, legal forms, and how you make them work for you. In terms of what they mean about financing, control, management, credibility, administration, and all the rest. Okay? I've come across this far too many times, and I still keep coming across it today, and I probably will in the future. Every so often I come across an enterprise, really passionate people, passionate entrepreneurs, a lot of support, a lot of interest in what they're doing, but their legal form is completely wrong. And they don't even realize that. And they're actually doing things which their legal form means that they shouldn't be doing, so they're acting illegally. Now, if it's found that you're doing things, you're running the business in a way that your legal form doesn't allow you to, then that's a big problem if something goes wrong. Because if something goes wrong and that gets found out, then you become personally liable, because the law will say you are seen as being negligent and fraudulent. You've acted in ways beyond your mandated authorities. So this is a really important lesson. Just because someone else, you meet someone else at an event, just because, I don't know, let's say they're the head of Social Enterprise UK or the senior commissioning officer in the NHS, and they say, oh yes, if you're a kick, then that's what you should be. Okay? They're not the people who are running your business. They're not the people who are accountable to the regulators and all the others. So make sure you understand what your legal form means for you. Make sure you can explain it to other people as well. Okay? Even if you've decided after the basis of today and you do a bit of reading, so well actually yeah, we think a charitable company is best for us. That's brilliant. Read up on it, make some notes so you can quickly explain to anyone why that's the best form for you, how that allows you to prove yourself as a social enterprise. It's useful to do a couple of other notes against other legal forms as well. And I say this based on experience, because I worked with a group once, and they got a meeting lined up with the head of commissioning in the county council where they were based. Very positive, very warm meeting, warm leads, all good to go. They went in and the head of commissioning said, oh, if only you were a kick, we would have been able to recognise you as a proper social enterprise and give you this contract, but you're not, so we can't. Goodbye. And this enterprise didn't know what to say. They had no comeback. So they walked away feeling very demoted, didn't know where to go next, very upset. Now, I had a chat with them afterwards, and I said, well, actually, you're not a kick because, and we went through what being a kick would mean to them, in that it wouldn't allow them to work in the way they wanted to work, and it would put additional risks in that they weren't comfortable with. But what the structure they did have was entirely appropriate. But because they didn't know that, because they couldn't articulate that to this commissioning officer, they lost the contract. They lost credibility in that authority's eyes. So it's always good, once you know which structure is right for you, know how you can explain that easily to people, but also have a couple of points to say, if I'm not going to be one of the other big ones, why did we not choose that one? Just so that keeps you in control of those conversations. That's the most important thing that I can suggest there. And that takes us back to where we started. Trying to make sense, try and make sense of these legal structures, how we approach them, what they mean in terms of how you can raise money, how you look after them, what can happen to you if you don't look after them properly. That's taken through us about 40-45 minutes. We've still got a bit of blue sky and sunshine out of my window, at least. Although I'm conscious that it's probably long overdue for a cup of coffee, and some of you may be sharing that feeling as well. I'm also conscious that some of you may have been sort of jotting in questions to Julie, who's the administrator for this webinar, as we've gone along. So what I'm going to ask Julie to do is just to kind of forward on to me those questions briefly. I'll make a note of them. That'll give you a few minutes just to nip to the toilet, make a cuppa, let the cat out if it's scratching at the door, and then we'll pick back up in a couple of minutes, if that's okay. And hopefully Julie's been listening in, so she knows how to do that.
Hi Adrian, can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. We do have quite a few questions that have come through, which I could read out now, and then hopefully you'll be able to answer them. I think that's the format that we've done previously. So the first question that somebody's asked is, can you register as a company limited by guarantee and then look to set up as a charity later on?
Oh, that's an easy answer. There's a short answer and a long answer. The short answer is yes. The long answer is yes, because that's a very wise thing to do. One of the questions which I get asked sometimes by groups and entrepreneurs is, we need to set something up in a hurry. You know, we've been offered this contract, we've been offered this money, but I need to incorporate a legal entity in order to be able to sign that contract. I can't sign it as myself. What's the best thing I can set up if I haven't had the time to explore what all the options are? And my kind of default position at the moment is, if you're not sure what's best for you, but you need something in a hurry and you need it cheap and easy, then a company limited by guarantee, absolutely. And that's because a company limited by guarantee, of all the legal options, is the quickest, cheapest and easiest to set up. It's the quickest, cheapest and easiest to look after and administer, and it's the quickest, cheapest and easiest to change into something else at a future date if you want to. So if you're wanting to become a kick later, well, you have to be a company first, so you've got the company bit done, that's fine, that gives you the options to be a kick in the future. If you're thinking, actually, we maybe want to be a charity in the future, but we're not quite sure it's right for us today, well, the company can apply for charitable status in the future as well. But it allows you to get going and get set up. One thing I didn't mention on some of these options was about timescales, and that might be useful to pick up on. Setting up a company, if you're in a rush and you're willing to pay the extra, you can do it within 24 hours. Companies have a fast-track process. Otherwise, it's usually a couple of weeks just to go through the post. A kick, because it's an application process, again, can be, once the company's set up, it can take up to a couple of months to clarify your purpose, or if it's been described really well, that's a couple of days in addition. A charity can take a couple of months. I think the Charity Commission, the last time I looked, they said on average it was about a month from when they received the application to when they awarded charitable status, if everything was in order. Now, if they have any queries, of course, that's got to come back and forth and be clarified and checked. So if you're in a hurry, company limited by guarantee, and then backfill it, and then you've still got all the options in the future.
Great, thank you. Another question that's come through, what are your limitations legally as an unincorporated association, and what's the best means to obtain funding?
Okay, so an unincorporated association. So this is where you have a group of people who don't have a legal identity as such, but they have maybe what's called a constitution, piece of paper that's headed up constitution that says, these are the rules by which we agree to all play together in terms of how we make our decisions and why we exist. In terms of the limits of your powers legally, there are none. Unincorporated associations can sign leases, can employ people, can apply for money, that's all fine. The risk is that if something goes bump, there's no legal identity to protect the individuals. So whoever signs those contracts become personally liable for an unlimited amount, in theory. So it's always worth checking. So once you start to take on risk, once you start to deal with money that we start, maybe that are in the tens of thousands, once we're signing contracts or leases, bidding for services, once we're employing people, taking on premises, all those things carry risk. So if something goes wrong, we want to make sure that we personally are protected. We won't lose the shirt off our back or have to sell our cats into slavery or something to pay for it. So it's useful to think about incorporation at that point. But in terms of limits, in the law there are no limits. In terms of accessing funding, again, you can apply as you go along, and it's all down then to that particular funding body as to what their criteria is. Some funding bodies will say you must have a charity number if you're applying for a grant. Quite a few aren't really that bothered. If you're looking for investment to grow the business as a loan, Again, most of them will say, well, we want to see some kind of assurance that you're not just going to take the money and run, so we want to see some form of legal incorporated body, and what are the rules around that. But again, that's going to be on a case-by-case basis. So hopefully that kind of gives you enough of a general answer without knowing too much of the specifics of that one.
Great. We've got quite a lot of questions coming in, so we'll try and get through them as quick as we can. Okay. The next one is what are the issues arising from starting as a sole trader to test the business, then intending to become a company limited by guarantee?
That's absolutely fine. That's how most social enterprises get started. As a sole trader, you register with the tax office, you do a return to the tax office once a year, and you pretty much get on with it. Once it gets to the stage where you think it's proven that the enterprise is viable, it's got legs, it's going to work, then you register. That's fine. As long as, once you've started as a sole trader, you register with HMRC, that's the tax office. You can go to hmrc.gov.uk, hmrc.gov.uk. There's a button you can press as for individuals. How do I register? Make sure you've done that, because if you don't, then you start trading and they find out, it's a slap on the wrist and a bit of a fine and a black mark on your file. But yeah, going from sole trader to incorporated is fine. At the point where you kind of move the business into the company, just be sure that you've told the bank, any funding bodies, any commissioning officers, your suppliers and all the rest, that as of whichever date it is, all of the contracts and agreements will be moving into that company's name rather than your own personal one.
Great. Okay, another question here. If company limited by guarantee is a good structure, which was obviously established before CICs came along, why do you think that most social financiers, including SIB, have a problem recognising the social mission of company limited by shares? Limited by guarantee, I think. Sorry, did that question make sense?
Yes, it did, and maybe I can clarify. Companies limited by guarantee existed before KICs. Yes, that's true. Everything that all the features that a KIC has, in terms of special bits in its trading name, the ability to protect certain characteristics and all the rest, can, since the Companies Act of 1985 and the Companies Act of 2006, have allowed those things to be done as well anyway. So why do certain bodies have a problem with CLGs if they don't have the KIC bolt on? I would suggest it's probably, in my experience, it's probably because those companies limited by guarantee either haven't specified in their articles or their rules clearly enough what their purpose is, and I come across this sometimes, social enterprises or cooperatives who don't actually specify in the rules why they exist. So that it's either not clear enough in their rules or they're not clear enough with that particular financing body. And that's my personal experience, just to clarify that particular comment.
Okay.
Hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah.
If we get enough time, we might be able to come back to that if people want to put a sort of second question on the back of it.
Great,
We've got less than 10 minutes, people, so the clock's ticking.
Well, we've got loads of questions going through. It's really good, actually. So as a company limited by guarantee director, somebody on the webinar is also the manager of the company and wants to know if they can be paid as a manager whilst they are a director. Is there a conflict of interest? If there isn't, is there a limit to how much they can be paid?
Okay, there are no limits in terms of the payments if it's okay to be done. That's the good news. As long as it's deemed to be, a reasonable wage, because you wouldn't want to be paying yourself £1 million a day if that wasn't the going market rate. Yes, you can be paid. So if it's just the company limited by guarantee, there's nothing else in terms of you bolted onto the side of it, you can be a director and the paid employee. That's absolutely fine. As long as you check those company articles, if there's a clause that says, directors can't be paid, then you can't. But that's only really an issue if you're selling the company's been set up to apply for charitable status. But double check anyway, just to be sure. The conflict of interest point, yes, absolutely. This applies to all legal structures, not just the 3 that we've sort of profiled today, but all 15, 16 in Scotland. Conflict of interest. If I'm a director or a trustee of an enterprise, then legally my primary responsibility is to act in the best interest of that enterprise, not in my own interests or a group, a particular group of the community or a family relation or whatever. If an issue comes up to the board that I'm not a director or trustee of, where I have an interest, so it's to do with staffing and I'm an employee, or it's to do with a supply contract and my wife runs a materials company who are interested in winning the work, I need to declare that as a conflict of interest. That needs to be recorded. It's then up to the other directors or trustees to make a judgment call as to whether they trust that I can still remain objective enough. If they think they can trust my judgment to remain objective and sound, then they'll record that in the minutes as well, that conflict of interest was authorized. Okay? If they think actually we want to be absolutely clean and transparent and accountable on this, Adrian, leave the room just for the next 5 minutes while we decide and have this discussion. But yeah, conflict of interest, very important in terms of recognizing it and managing it appropriately. So hopefully that answers that one.
Quick question here. What is the IPS?
IPS. The IPS, yes, because it was referenced on a slide. IPS stands for Industrial and Provident Society. They are the legal forms which used to be the ones that you adopted if you were a cooperative, either as a kind of a worker cooperative, so the employees are the members, or community benefit society, so a consumer cooperative, all the customers are the members and own the business between themselves. IPSs are not quite so commonplace or exciting today because company laws become a lot more flexible. Those kind of defining values and principles of cooperatives can easily be put now and reflected in terms of company or partnership articles and rules. But they're still useful. I mean, where they're kind of still quite active is in community share issues. So where you can say, we've got a great idea, we're going to build a wind farm, the community shop, via the post office, whatever it is, and we're going to go to the community to raise the money to buy that thing. So the community will own the shares, the community will own the enterprise, in effect. Then that uses what's called a community benefit society, or a BENCOM model. If you want to look at that option in a bit more detail, particularly around this idea of community shares and the community financing enterprise, there's a very good program that's being run by Co-operatives UK in partnership with the Cabinet Office, and there's a website with case studies and a newsletter and all the rest you can sign up to at communityshares. I think it's .org, but if you kind of Google community shares, Co-operatives UK, if not, then that should find it pretty quickly. Hopefully that answers that one.
Cool.
Let's go. Tick, tick, tick. Who else have we got?
Yeah, so we've got, can you start a company limited by shares and then later convert to a company limited by guarantee?
It's a yes-no answer to this. Once you set a company up with shares, if you want to then change it to a guarantee company, you have to dissolve the share company and reform a guarantee company. You can't kind of transfer your shares into guarantees. Okay, it doesn't work that way. So what you would do, the practical way of managing that would be, while that company limited by shares is running, you incorporate a parallel company limited by guarantee. Once that is up and all the kind of administrative stuff's in place with that, you would transfer all of the kind of contracts and stuff or assets, whatever, into the company limited by guarantee, and then wind up the company limited by shares. Now, just as a slight suspicion, because this is something that comes up a lot, and I think it's to me it seems a really obvious idea, but it's not. Maybe that's because I've spent too much time thinking of odd stuff. If you find that your legal structure is getting in the way of you accessing grants or certain types of finance, don't think you have to change your legal form straight away. But that's the answer. There may be a much easier answer, which is to form a partnership with another organisation that does have the right legal structure. Okay, so don't, because once you change your legal form, you're then bound by that regulator, by those rules, by that structure. So, if you're a company limited by shares and you think you want to apply for grants, but it's just for that specific elements, well, partner with a charity. They've got the acceptable face for applying for grants. They can bid for the money. They can deliver it in partnership with you, and you can still carry on running the enterprise and managing it in the way that you want it to do.
And a good question, which follow-on question from that is, if you are partnering with somebody else, can you use their charity number but have your own legal structure?
Kind of. You can't use their charity number. Only they can use their charity number. What you would do is, if you're working in partnership and there was a certain audience who you wanted to present the acceptable base of charity to, you'd ask your charity partner to be the lead partner with them. Where it maybe didn't matter so much, you'd agree that in the partnership you would lead the partnership to those other ones. You can't you can't pass yourself off as a different organisation. That's again a bit of a no-no, and you get into all sorts of trouble.
What are the tax implications of a charity, a company limited by guarantee, and a CIC?
Okay, tax implications. Get a good bookkeeper. That's what I would always say to begin with. Actually, just to clarify, have we got a webinar, Julie? Have we got a webinar in this series on tax?
Not in this series, but it'll be something we're going to hopefully be having new ones added in after January. Okay. So I think tax is on the list.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, so broadly speaking, tax implications: if you make a profit, you pay tax on it. And that's a profit from trading activities. Okay, so if you trade and it generates a profit, you pay tax, and that applies to as a company or as a charity. Okay, what you would want to do is find a good accountant or a bookkeeper to work with you to help you prepare your accounts. So when you get to the end of the year, if it looks like your trading activities are going to be generating a profit, then they are kind of allocated against costs in the next year, that they are used to offset other costs coming in. So that on the accounts, they're not shown as a profit, but they're actually being used, so you're not going to get taxed on them. That's really important. As a charity, the big tax implication is about business rates. You know, as a charity, if you're taking premises, you're automatically entitled to 80% rate relief. The other 20% you would apply for discretionarily, and that's the same. So as a company or a KIC, you can apply for the 20% as well. VAT applies to everyone universally, whether you're a sole trader, a charity, a KIC, whatever, which is once your trading income, the income of your goods and services you sell, once that hits the VAT threshold, you must register for VAT, regardless of your legal structure. If you want to know more about VAT, hmrc.gov.uk, very good guidance on VAT. They have lots of good webinars, podcasts as well as some good case studies and work examples. Yeah, okay. So that cover tax, hopefully.
Cool.
We've got left, Julie, about 90 seconds.
About 90 seconds. We've actually still got about 5 or 6 questions. So what I'm going to suggest is if people can email these
I'm happy
questions.
to go for another 5 minutes.
Okay, well, we'll carry on for another 5 minutes then. And then if any questions don't get answered, if people want to...
we're recording this...
Yes.
Yeah, because we're recording these, so people can kind of pick up when they go online afterwards, and they can kind of get the last 5 minutes if they need to leave early to pick up kids or get to the dentist.
Okay, that's fine. If any questions don't get answered though, if people want to email me after this webinar, and I will check with Adrian and we can get responses back to you. So we'll go for another 5 minutes, try and get through as many of the last ones as we can. So the next one is, as many social funders say you have to have capital before they will consider any loan, does this not point towards the benefit of company limited by shares as opposed to companies limited by guarantee? And do you have any comments on this?
If you're asking somebody for money, they like to see that you're successful at getting money to begin with. Okay, they like to know that you can raise money otherwise, the other means. Traditionally, businesses raise money through shares. They sell shares to raise money, that's fine. You can also raise money, though, as a company limited by guarantee through what's called loan stock or directed loans. So the company is a legal identity in its own right, and maybe I lend it some money on certain terms, which says, you know, it agrees to pay me back in 5 years at 1% interest. That's a way to raise capital very quickly and easily, and we can specify our own terms doing it that way. So I don't think you know, the share or guarantee it doesn't make it any difference in your ability to raise capital. It just means you raise it in slightly different ways.
Cool. Okay. Do any of the legal entities presented make it harder to demonstrate that a social enterprise is not for profit?
So do they make it easier or harder to demonstrate?
It says harder here in the questions.
Okay, so while a charity is regulated by the Charity Commission, everyone knows that a charity exists to help little Johnny and the left-handed hamsters of the world have better lives and not make money. So that's kind of an easy tell. KICS, like I mentioned, there isn't the general public recognition yet. So in terms of being a sort of not-for-private profit, it's all about the way you brand yourself and the way you communicate and present your image to your audiences, your customers and partners. If you want a quick and easy solution to that, be a charity. Otherwise, it comes back to thinking about your branding and communications. And I know we've got other webinars in the series looking at those issues. So I'll leave those for those seminars coming up.
Cool. At what stage should you set up a company limited by guarantee, and where can you find online agents to help you?
Okay, at what stage should you do it? When you're ready to, really, I guess. Once you set it up, it's a bit of time and cost and hassle to set it up. If you don't need it, you can kind of keep it dormant, but it's a bit of a hassle. And then if you want to get rid of it, then it's more time, cost, and money to get rid of it. So be sure you're ready to take it on. So maybe there's some of those thresholds we mentioned before about taking your money, exposing yourselves to risk, credibility with different audiences. Where can you go online to find it? If you kind of do an internet search for company incorporation agents, okay, there's a whole slew of them online. Most of them, though, are set up around private profit-making companies. So have a bit of a filtering search. I mentioned before, Unlimited, through their Connect program, have lawyers who can potentially can offer some pro bono stuff. There are programs like LawWorks and such like you can get pro bono support for as well on this. If you want, and also all the big sector bodies will offer a legal incorporation service. So, for example, people like Co-operatives UK have a legal services team. You don't have to be a cooperative to use it, but they can take you through and sort out all the incorporation stuff, regardless of whatever legal structure you want to have.